and welcome to the F1 Report. In the final European round of 2017, Mercedes' Lewis Hamilton secured victory in the Italian Grand Prix to move 3 points ahead of Sebastian Vettel in the Drivers' Championship, the first time he's had the lead this season. Hamilton led home a team 1-2, with Vettel having to settle for third place, going some way to appease the Tifosi at their home race. Joining me to go through the Italian Grand Prix this week is Sky F1's Marc Priestley and former McLaren and Ferrari man Pat Fry. Welcome back, Pat. Good to see you. You've, of course, been there with Ferrari, right in the cauldron that is Monza. What is it like? What's the pressure like?
There's always a huge amount of pressure at any race. But Monza just winds it up sort of yet another level. And, you know, it's just all about Ferrari, isn't it? I mean, I can remember being there at McLaren and they were trying to turn the minibus over because we were, you know, we were the enemy. Being there with them and working for them, it is just fantastic, but a huge amount of pressure. And
what would they have felt about a third place?
I don't think a third place matters, really. I mean, it's all about winning. I mean, that's the whole philosophy of Ferrari, is you have to win. You know, clearly they didn't get things right this weekend, but I also think the nature of the circuit doesn't help their current car.
Well, we didn't ever think that they were going to do particularly well there, but I suppose Spa did give us a glimmer of hope that they may have improved in the development race.
Yeah, I think that was the thing. I think it built hope up, probably unjustified, because it is a different race. I know it's low downforce. Similarly, the two circuits are low downforce, but Monza's a unique race, and you know, you have to bring a unique package to be successful there, and ultimately Ferrari's low downforce package wasn't as good as Mercedes.
You were right under the podium on Sunday.
Yeah,
lucky
amazing.
Thing, was it?
Oh, it's just an incredible experience. It's just, I love the way they allow the fans onto the circuit to fill that place, and you know, as you know, they're such passionate fans there, and I know they didn't get the win that they all wanted, but they did have a guy up on the podium, and it gave them something at least to cheer and to boo at, of course, when it was Lewis.
Were you surprised they booed at Lewis, or was that all part of the theatre?
Well, as Pat says, you know, when we worked at McLaren, we had the van attacked. I've nearly had the shirt ripped off my back walking past the catch fencing. It's, you know, they are passionate fans and they hate everybody apart from Ferrari.
Italian women, they just want to see you with your top off. Plenty to discuss on the show, the farcical nature of Sunday's grid penalties and McLaren's tense engine situation. But first, here's a quick recap of the race.
Welcome to Monza. Just outside of Milan, the Autodromo Nazionale Monza for the 67th Formula One World Championship Grand Prix. And it's lights out, and away we go. Hamilton does get away well. Stroll already coming under pressure as Hamilton cuts him off from Esteban Ocon. And that's Max Verstappen. Look at that. Puncture and damage for him, and that must have been the tangle with the Williams.
We have damage, front puncture.
Here comes Sebastian Vettel on Esteban Ocon. Has Sebastian Vettel put himself up and into the podium places? Yes, he has.
Ferrari cannot stay with Mercedes this afternoon.
What Farman is doing? He needs to give me back the position.
Steam coming out from underneath his crash helmet. Sergio Perez is trying to have a look down the inside, maybe. That is supreme craftsmanship from Daniel Ricciardo.
Oh, he's in the gravel domination here from Mercedes-Benz.
Kimi Raikkonen is having a go round the outside into the first chicane. He moves up into 6th place.
Nice move.
Man, what was that? He's just turning to me.
Down the inside, Daniel Ricciardo. That is a sensational move. That was like an extra set down the inside on that Ferrari. And it's been an absolute breeze for Hamilton today. He takes the championship lead for the first time in 2017 and wins the Italian Grand Prix.
Sergio Marchionne said it was embarrassing to have been beaten so comprehensively by Mercedes. Is that what really compounded their misery, that it was just such a margin? And actually after Spa, we kind of anticipated it being at least closer.
Yeah, I mean, I was impressed by their performance at Spa. You know, the nature of the Spa circuit, it's all about, you know, downforce. It's a power circuit, but downforce is really important. And in reality, the flowing high-speed corners is somewhere where, you know, the Mercedes has shone and the Ferrari have struggled. Monza is all about the power unit performance, so you need horsepower, but you also need a huge amount of recovery from the rest of the system, you know, particularly recovery from the turbo, from the H. You know, I was expecting Mercedes to be a chunk ahead again of Ferrari, maybe not the, whatever it was, 7 or 8 tenths in the race. You know, but, you know, the comments of getting the setup wrong or something like that when you get that wrong, it's 2 or 3 tenths maximum, really. And I think variation track to track just highlights a difference in the 2 cars that do the same lap time at one circuit won't or do a completely different lap time at a different circuit with different characteristics, and it's how you've designed the car and the engine.
Do you think there'll be a fallout at Ferrari because of this? Do you think heads will roll?
No, I don't think it'll be that extreme a reaction. I know Sergio Marchionne has come out with his comments, but he does that quite regularly. He likes to keep the pressure on the team. I actually think that the circuits coming up possibly will swing back towards Ferrari in terms of them suiting their car. And I think Monza was always likely to be a difficult one. And actually, with Sebastian getting third behind the 2 Mercs, it's probably a sort of damage limitation. Shame Kimi couldn't back that up with a 4th. But I suspect that's probably as good as they could have hoped for.
And actually, if Red Bull hadn't taken the penalties that they did, they could have easily taken that podium from Seb, couldn't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they looked, performance-wise, a better car.
Well, it wasn't it wasn't a good weekend for them. However, as I say, they took the best of the rest with Seb. But I just think their package that they took, their low downforce package, wasn't as efficient as the Merc was, clearly. And and together with the sort of high-performing power unit that the Mercedes has, you saw that with the front row of the grid. I know it was all done in the wet, but the top few cars were all Mercedes-powered cars. So it makes a big difference, as Pat says, and that was ultimately the key.
OK, so would the result have been any different had qualifying not been in the wet?
I don't think so, to be honest. I mean, the qualifying result might have been different. Maybe Ferrari would have been a bit further up, Williams a little bit further back. But I think in the end, it was a clear Mercedes track. I mean, we go to Singapore, that is maximum downforce. Energy recovery is easy because there's so many braking zones there, so you're not fighting for energy, so your power unit's a lot better off anyway, and that will swing back, well, a bit like Monaco. That is going to be a Ferrari track. Malaysia, I think, is halfway between the two, and then I think they'll be fairly close. And when we look at Suzuka, that'll be interesting to see, can Ferrari repeat their performance that they had in Spa.
Absolutely. OK, well, it couldn't have been any more different from Saturday to Sunday in terms of the weather. Hamilton secured a record 69th pole position in qualifying in Monza, surpassing Michael Schumacher in the process. And it's a question that will no doubt divide motorsport fans, but where does Lewis Hamilton lie in the pantheon of greats for you?
Well, he's clearly right up there. I mean, he's an outstanding driver, outstanding talent. I mean, when I first worked with him at McLaren in well, God, when is it? So long ago. It was 2007, wasn't it? Yes. Yeah. Straight away, you would say, after a couple of races, more often than not, he would have out-qualified Fernando, even at that point. If you asked me to put a percentage on it, 70 Lewis, 30 Fernando in qualifying. If you asked me when I come to race, it would have been the other way round back then. But obviously, his racecraft and talent there over a long run has improved as well. So, he is the full package, isn't he, really?
OK, well, amazingly, Hamilton's win on Sunday was the first time a driver has won back-to-back races this year. The win puts him 3 points ahead of Vettel, to which Vettel said it's most important to lead after the last race. The rest, no one remembers. Do you agree? Because, I mean, you have to... Well, of course, it's true in terms of the title, but you'd have to say this felt like an important swing in Lewis's favour, and he did say how important it was for him to get these 2 wins because, as Pat has alluded to, the next few races seem to favour Ferrari's car more.
Well, I think that's right. I think, these 2 races that have just gone, Lewis has been at the top of his game. He's delivered everything he had to do, and it was absolutely crucial that him and Mercedes did that, for exactly the reasons that Pat has said, that it may swing the other way or at least become more challenging in the next few races. So Lewis didn't put a foot wrong. In fact, he put 2 wheels wrong, didn't he, over the gravel at one point in the race. But that was about all you could say he did wrong this weekend. And they was cruising so much that by lap 12 or 13, he turned his engine down. That's how much of an advantage he had over the rest of the field.
How much did Seb do wrong? Because actually, wasn't it more about the car? OK, we know that we found out later that he had an off at lap 40 that damaged the bottom of his car, but actually, in terms of the lead that Lewis had, it was already established by then, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't think Seb did much wrong either. With the package that he had, he probably, as I said before, I think he maximised what they had pretty much and did the best they were ever going to achieve, which was third. Got himself onto that Monza podium and minimise the damage that you know in the championship. 3 points is nothing. You know, it's great for us because it's nip and tuck, and as we say, it's going to swing back and forwards, we think, as the season goes on, and that's what you really want.
It certainly does make it very exciting for the fans. Something that doesn't make it so exciting is this raft of penalties that went through the field, resulting in 16 of the 20 drivers starting in different positions from where they qualified on Saturday. At one point, it was only Lewis that started where he qualified, but by the time things swung around, I mean, Sergio Perez, for example, qualified 11th, had a 5-place grid penalty and actually started 10th.
It's a joke, isn't it?
I mean, it really is. What can the sport do about this? Can we just do away with these penalties?
I think it is a little difficult, really. I mean, they're there for a reason, to control engine development. You know, that's the reason for having them.
There must be another way,
We've got to do it in a different way that doesn't penalise the driver.
Surely.
Constructors' points, I think, is a great way. Is a good compromise. You have to have a way of controlling people. Yeah. But it's got to the point where the richer teams are taking the penalties deliberately, strategically.
Well, no, absolutely. You
and
choose
throwing
the good
more
races.
money at, exactly. They're all aiming for Singapore, where they don't need to have. They don't want to take penalties, and throwing, you know, power unit bits at it left, right, and centre. So it doesn't control costs because they're all spending more. The teams that can. And for the fans at home, and it's an absolute joke. I think we need to get rid of it as quickly as we can.
I mean, talking before the race, I was asking the drivers where they were starting, and they didn't even know.
No, I can appreciate. I mean, it is massively confusing, but you know, you need to come up with something that will at least try and control the, you know, the engine costs spiralling out of control again.
And what are your thoughts on separating constructors from drivers in that respect? Because, you know, some would argue that actually it is a team sport, and you've got to take the hit whether you're a constructor or a driver.
You know, it's not a bad idea, but all these things, at some point, it will add to confusion, isn't it? The guy that has won the World Championship, his team is last. You know, it's just going to get very, very confusing, isn't it?
Well, one of the ideas that came up on social media was that the team should be fined and the money should go to charity. I think that was actually Ted's idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fine, and it's a nice way to do it, but it won't affect a team, you know, and it won't stop a team taking strategic penalties. The thing that hurts a team is constructors' points. That's what they want. That's what they rely on for income in terms of prize money and, of course, their position in the championship. You've got to hurt the team if you want to stop them doing this deliberately, which is what's happening. I think constructors' points is the only way to do it.
So do you think the FIA will be looking at this at the moment? Will they be, you know, because they did come in for a lot of criticism?
Well, no, absolutely, I'm sure they are, but it's not a simple case of just forget the penalties, because all the engineers will exploit that, and there'll just be an even bigger development race.
Yeah.
So you know, it is a difficult thing that needs a lot of thought.
There is no easy answer, as is often the way in Formula One. Right, that's all we've got time for in part one. Join us after the break as we hear from a former F1 driver on Red Bull's performance in Italy, and we reflect on an amazing drive from Daniel Ricciardo. Plus, we look at McLaren's ongoing engine saga. We'll see you in a bit. Welcome back to the F1 Report. Following Sunday's Italian Grand Prix, I caught up with Damon Hill to discuss the race, and we were joined by a very familiar face making his return to an F1 race for the first time in several years. Well, it's an F1 Report special because I am delighted to say I'm joined by not only Damon Hill but Robert Kubica. So, guys, how are you both? Did you enjoy the race?
I'm fine, thank you. Yeah, the race was nice. Also, it's good to be back in the paddock, although I would prefer as a driver, but yeah, after what I have been, and I have opportunity to test F1 car, was nice to see old friends, and yeah, follow the race from the paddock.
Very popular return to have Robert back here, isn't it? What did you make of the race today? Mercedes in a class of their own.
Definitely. I think we have, if you look at it as a whole, I think the qualifying was quite exciting. Definitely one of the best qualifying sessions I think we've had this year, and threw up some exciting opportunities for new guys to be up the front, like Lance Stroll and Ocon. He did a good job. So, and sadly, unfortunately, they can't keep up the pace, can they, with the guys at front? So the normal order was restored. Terrific job by Mercedes, completely dominate this place all the time. And it was quite sad to see Ferrari not being able to mount a challenge. So, you know, for the championship, I think that's got to be worrying for them.
Only 3 points separating the top two, though. But were you surprised that Ferrari couldn't be more competitive here?
Yes and not, to be honest. I think was a very good circuit for Mercedes. Ferrari, yeah, it was outpaced today. But still Vettel managed to, let's say, limit loss of points, finishing third after yesterday qualifying, difficult qualifying. And I think, to be honest, Singapore will be kind of maybe turnover point. It will for sure give us a better overview for the last part of the season. If Ferrari manage to turn around and will be in the front of Mercedes in Singapore, we could have a very exciting end of the season. And I think second drivers will play a very important role, but also Red Bull. Red Bull on twisty, high downforce circuits, they have very, very good chassis, and where engine is less important, they can play a very important role with putting their car in the middle of the pack or even stalling the points from Mercedes and Ferrari. So second drivers and Red Bull, I think, will be the key points of end of season.
Great analysis. I mean, Red Bull were seriously impressive today. Daniel Ricciardo.
Yeah. I was going to ask Robert, what drivers impress you? Because I mean, you obviously so eager to be in the car yourself, and you must be looking at these as potential other competitors. And I know you have a good eye for that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's difficult to judge from outside, but for sure, Red Bull looks like Sunday is turning out completely the pace. They always struggle in qualifying, and then suddenly in the race they manage to do always very, very good pace. And today's strategy for both Red Bulls were something which I was thinking, and actually I have a chat with some guys, and they say, well, I will start super soft, and I say, well, I will start soft, to be honest, and it turned out a very good idea. And yeah, he didn't have the best first lap, but he did amazing first and second stint, so yeah, congratulations to him. And he again showed that consistency, and maybe not the fastest times, but driving with intelligence and thinking what to do, and looking especially to bring the points home is the crucial point.
Well, great to hear Kubica's thoughts on the Red Bulls. Do you think that they will fare well in Singapore? In fact, do you think Mercedes should be more worried about them than even Ferrari?
I think it is definitely a Red Bull track. I mean, I was very impressed by Red Bull. Monza, I would not. It's just not their sort of track. You know, they've played up engine issues for years. Yet they're right there. I mean, they were there in qualifying, and they came through the field in the race. So, I mean, for me, it's an outstanding performance. You would think they're going to be even better in Singapore. I mean, it is one of the tracks that should favour them heavily.
Let's talk about that qualifying for a second, because it was utterly miserable. There's no doubt about it. Daniel and Max were fantastic in quali. As you would have to say, it was Lance Stroll. I mean, the first time that he's driven an F1 car in the wet, how accomplished a performance was that?
It was really good. It was very, very good. I thought the Red Bulls were excellent. As I say, as Pat says, I think it surprised everybody. But when they took their engine penalties, and you suddenly realise Lance is starting on the front row, for someone who's never done that before on wet tyres, under such pressure that he was back then on that Saturday afternoon, because they didn't get much of an opportunity. You know, they were suddenly released, weren't they, when the rain stopped at the end of that session, and that was your one shot to go and do it, and he delivered. And I thought that was, for a young kid who's still in the early days of his career, who's had quite a lot of pressure on his shoulders throughout this season, he delivered, and he outperformed his teammate quite considerably, did very, very well. And in a car that they didn't expect to fare well in the wet. How do you explain that? Well, I think when you get into those situations, you are looking much more for the driver to outperform the car, and you're looking for him to find the grip, perhaps where other drivers can't find the grip. You're looking for them to find ways to turn on, to get heat into the tyres, which is very, very difficult. Some cars do it better than others, but some drivers certainly do it better than others. And I think he managed to find it. You know, he managed to find everything in that right moment to deliver the lap time. And then in terms of the race, Daniel going from 16th up to 4th, is he the best overtaker at the moment on the grid? I mean, it was a fantastic drive. I mean, that lunge he did at the end was fantastic, wasn't it? But then I think, you know, to some degree, it's the nature of the car that you've got. You know, I mean, Max has done some fantastic drives and some fantastic overtakes as well, hasn't he? So how do we know whether it's the car or the driver? I'm sure it's an element of both, isn't it? The driver will always claim it, though. Do you think they will regret taking their penalties? Do you think they could have expected a podium had they not? I must admit, I would have been thinking the way they were, as they got a better chance in Singapore than they had in Monza, to be honest. I mean, I would think, you know, the wet conditions, maybe other people struggled more than them. But you know, it's, you know, their race pace is, for me, is massively impressive. To actually be able to come through the field was absolutely outstanding. Another difficult weekend for Max, you'd have to say. I mean, you know, there were moments of light. You know, he qualified brilliantly, and you know, some great overtakes and tucked inside the points there. But that contact at the beginning with Massa put paid to his race, didn't it? Well, that comes perhaps as a consequence of you taking those penalties and putting yourself right down the back of the grid, doesn't it? And we all want to see Max dicing it up towards the front, you know, and at some point that will come. Perhaps Singapore will be the time where we really get to see him shine, but it's such a shame to see him continually dropping out of races and robbing us as fans of what a great driver he is. I have to say though, I think Daniel Ricciardo, driver of the day for me this weekend.
Yes. And many fans agreed, because that's what he was voted. A bad day for Max, but not as bad as for the both McLaren drivers. Yet another 2 DNFs mean that Fernando Alonso and Stoffel van Dorn have now only been in the points 3 times between them all season. Similar to the grid penalty discussion, this race was the final straw, or was it, for McLaren and their relationship with Honda? At the time of recording, no decision has yet been made, but it could be imminent this week. I mean, it couldn't come a moment too soon, could it?
Well, they are struggling massively, aren't they? And it's, I'm sure their car isn't the best thing out there, but it's fairly clear where the main problem is. And how do they get themselves out of it? I mean, it's 3 years now. It's difficult. I can understand and sympathise for them, really. I mean, it's got to be a very difficult position to be in.
So, I mean, just how difficult? Would you split, or would you stick with Honda and hope for improvement?
Well, it's sort of a corporate decision, and all the engineers will be saying, dump it and run, that other thing's got more H recovery, more horsepower, the lap time's going to be whatever, half a second quicker if we go to a Renault, or whatever the number is, but they'll know all that from simulation. The engineers, it's what we do. So you'll have one group of people screaming, saying it's just a no-brainer, and then you've got all the commercial aspects and everything else, and that's why it's such an awkward problem, really,
isn't it? It's a big web.
And it's good having manufacturers in the sport as well, isn't it? So it's almost grows beyond McLaren as being an issue. It
seems a strange one, though, because the option on the table at the moment, at least, is Renault. And yet we've got Max complaining about Renault and wanting to split from them and them causing all sorts of problems for Red Bull.
They did a reasonable job on a power circuit, didn't they, this weekend?
True.
So, it's not all as bad as it seems there, I would have thought.
But actually, sorry, Alan Prost told me at the weekend we can't promise Fernando a championship-winning car next year. So if he's saying that...
Well, he can't, but nor can Honda. I mean, Honda certainly can't, we don't think, can we? For me, the relationship has broken down too far with McLaren and Honda behind the scenes. I think there's a lot more going on in this deal that we talk about, looking at, is it better to take a Renault engine or a Honda engine? It's not that simple. There's lots of legal issues going on. There's lots of relationship issues. The relationship between McLaren and Honda, I think, has broken down, for me, beyond the point of no return. The relationship of their star driver and Honda, equally. We saw quite a big change in Fernando's outlook this weekend and some of the things he was saying and some of the things McLaren was saying from what we've seen previously. And I think there's a lot of issues going on where I think McLaren and Honda, or McLaren would like to get out of that Honda deal. I think I've heard rumours of both parties looking to sue each other in either direction, looking for getting compensation on either side to get out of that deal. And when you look at those sorts of issues, perhaps McLaren pointing their aggression or pointing their frustration not all towards Honda over this last race would edge towards them not sort of looking or making this whole situation look as though they're only trying to get a better performing engine with Renault. Perhaps if they start to give this impression that yes, the relationship's fine, yes, they're kind of working with Honda, yet the Honda keeps failing, then there's an argument for McLaren to start saying, look, we're paying a lot of money, or sorry, that McLaren are not paying a lot of money, there's a lot of money going into this project, and you are not delivering us results. The relationship's got so bad, for me, just get a divorce. It's like watching two of your best mates going out with each other and they're arguing all the time, you're thinking, just get a divorce. This is frustrating to watch, but you can't say that to them because they've got to work it out themselves.
Don't be so defeatist.
Well, it's
marriage counselling.
I know,
bit of therapy.
Look, how many years can Honda start promising McLaren results and fail to deliver?
Sure, and actually, how difficult is it for F1 that Honda have been perceived to have failed in their return to the sport?
Oh, no, absolutely.
And how important is it for Honda to stay in F1, for the greater good of the sport?
Well, I think having big manufacturers in, it's what the sport needs, isn't it? But it needs to be at a level where you're reasonably competitive. You're never going to get everything the same, are you? But it's clear there's a deficit there, and it's just a difficult situation that's developed over the last 3 years. I mean, the first step was always going to be a struggle, but it is surprising how little progress there's been over the last years.
So how can we get out of this situation? Is one of the answers that's been mooted that they go to Toro Rosso And what kind of domino effect will that have?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure all the engineers at Toro Rosso will be shouting, just like all the engineers at McLaren, going, you know, what's going on? Don't be stupid, you're making my car slower. Which is why it's sort of beyond engineering, it's into, you know, politics and sort of legal fees, isn't it, really?
It'll be the straw that breaks Carlos Sainz back as well, won't it?
Well, no, because Carlos Sainz is going to be a part of this negotiation, because if you're Red Bull, you want that Honda because you can keep an eye on it in your junior team for a year, maybe 2 years.
True, yeah.
See it develop. At some point, it has to turn the corner, and then do Red Bull then have a manufacturer to fall back on, and McLaren don't? You know, I think there's a lot more at stake. And also, if they are going to take this, and I think the whole decision now rests on Toro Rosso deciding what they're going to do, perhaps Carlos Sainz is a pawn in this game, because if Renault needs, or if Toro Rosso need to get out of their Renault contract, could they offer Carlos Sainz as a little bit of a teaser to say, look, here's a great driver.
Well, that's what I mean. He'll want to be out. I mean, he wants to get out of Toro Rosso anyway, so this
could all work. But I think that's the thing. That's the thing that everyone's looking for, the decision from Toro Rosso and Honda. And if that works, McLaren are then free to go to Renault. If it doesn't work, and Honda are somehow forced out of this sport, it leaves Formula One in a relatively precarious position with only 3 engine manufacturers. What if Renault decide they've had enough in a couple of years' time? You know, we as a sport rely so heavily on our engine manufacturers and how they participate in the game that we need to keep as many of them as possible.
And what about Fernando in all of this? Do you expect him to stay in the sport?
I mean, Fernando is massively competitive. He only ever wants to win. And he must be massively frustrated. I'm surprised he's stuck at it for 3 years, to be honest. So I think...
Well, he hasn't really had many other options, has he?
Well, no, absolutely. But that's also a difficult situation that he's put himself in, really, isn't it? I honestly don't know. I mean, he is one of the best drivers out there still, in my opinion, anyway. And it's just such a shame that he's not actually in a competitive car.
Absolutely. OK, well, that's all we've got time for this week. My thanks to Pat and Mark for joining me. We'll be back in a few days' time as we look ahead at arguably the marquee race of the season, the Singapore Grand Prix. We hope you can join us then. Bye-bye for now.